Hei og velkommen til dere som ser på. Jeg heter Kristine Oddvin Andersen og jobber i Flux, som da utgir sakprosabøker og driver med dialogarbeid. Vi har mye fokus på psykologi, psykisk helse, på økologi, på bevissthet, filosofi og vitenskap. Og i dag er jeg skikkelig gira. Vi har med oss Tina Payne Bryson, som sammen med Daniel Siegel har skrevet en rekke bøker om foreldre-barn-relasjon. Tina har også skrevet flere bøker på egen hånd, inkludert da, sammen med Daniel Siegel, bestselgeren The Whole Brain Child. Og denne boka utga Flux på norsk i 2022 under navnet På lag med hjernen. 12 foreldrestrategier for mindre konflikt og en sunn, emosjonell og intellektuell utvikling. Lang og fin titel der. Kjempespennende og bra bok. Vært en personlig favoritt for meg også, som mamma. Og i dag så skal vi snakke litt med Tina og høre, få litt bakgrunn omkring hvorfor de skrev boka, hva de ønsker å oppnå med den. Og så håper jeg også å få spørre Tina litt om kanskje hennes favorittstrategier fra denne boka da, og hvordan hun har brukt dem som mamma, tror jeg også selv mamma. So, welcome Tina. We are really pleased to have you with us and appreciate you taking the time to have a little chat with us about one of your first books, The Whole Brain Child.
Yeah.
Would you like to start by giving us just a quick introduction of yourself and your background?
I am a mom to 3 boys, and they were very much a part of my purpose in writing the book. I am also a licensed psychotherapist, doing a lot of work with kids and teenagers and a lot of parent support. I'm the founder and executive director of a multidisciplinary clinical practice where I live in Southern California near Los Angeles, that brings together lots of professionals to help us support kids and families. And then I write books and I talk about them. So I actually travel the world, which is wonderful, sharing some of the things that Dan and I write about in our books. And really for me, my life's work is really about supporting parents and educators and people who invest in children, to put into practice all of the amazing knowledge that we have that really supports the things that people have known for generations, even before we had the science. But the science is really helpful for us to understand in a deeper way.
So, The Whole Brain Child, how would you describe this book if you were to describe it in just a few sentences? How would you sum it up?
Yeah, I think, we start the book with a really important idea that sometimes as parents, it feels like we're just trying to survive the moments. We're just trying to get through a moment or a day. We're counting down the minutes until bedtime because the days can be so challenging. And really what we talk about in this very opening introduction in the book is that the survive moments are the thrive moments. And what we mean by that is the moments that are challenging with our kids are actually incredible opportunities. It's not like we're really good parents and we're thriving when our kids are doing well, or it's really hard and we're bad parents. It's really the idea that the challenging moments are really the moments that if we respond to our children in the way that we talk about in the book, that it actually helps build the relationship and builds optimal development. So really the Whole Brain Child, just as a summary, is a way to think about how to use the survive moments as opportunities to help our children's brains develop optimally so that they have the use of their whole brain so that they can have a thriving life. That's really the main idea of the book.
Yeah. So, what did you want to accomplish? Was there a lack of these kind of books?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is this book I never planned on writing a book. That was never my plan in life. My plan in life was to be a professor and to teach, and maybe to do some research, and then to mostly stay home and raise my children as a stay-at-home mom. That was my main plan. In fact, my husband and I waited about 6 years before, when he got his first sort of bigger job, once he was finished with graduate school, so that I could stay home. But then financially, it wasn't feasible for us. So I said, okay, well, let me go get my PhD so that I can be a professor, and then I can have a good schedule so I can be with our children. And I was a really frustrated grad student as I was working on my PhD, because I really wanted to understand more about the why. I really wanted to understand the mechanism of all of the things I was learning about related to child development. And I went to a conference, and Dan Siegel was the keynote speaker. And he started explaining this concept of integration that we talk about in the book, which is the idea that different parts, like in a brain, the brain is just one example, but so we'll use that since that's what our book is about, is like the different parts of our brain do really important jobs, but when they work together as a coordinated whole, that's what allows us to be flexible and adaptive and coherent and energized and stable. And that's a really healthy way to think about mental health and healthy relationships. So all of a sudden, I sort of had a way to think about this. And I was so excited about learning about the brain and the nervous system that I went and found him after the talk, which was very unusual for me. I tend actually to be a little bit shy sometimes. And so I said to him, I need to study more of this. And he was teaching a class at UCLA. So I went and took that class in addition to my other graduate work. And then I ended up studying with Dan for a period of about 10 years. But when I first started studying with him, I had tiny, small children at home. And so I would go to these courses where we would take a deep dive into the brain and the nervous system and these concepts of integrating the left and right hemisphere and the higher structures and the lower structures. In the book, we call it the upstairs and the downstairs brain. And I was thinking about all of this as I was sitting in Los Angeles traffic, trying to get back to my babies. And I started thinking about how I could apply this to what I was doing in the everyday moments. And then I started really seeing that knowing this about the brain and how we can build the brain through how we respond to our children and what we teach them, and how we interact with them relationally, I was like, oh, parents need to know this, and educators need to know this, and professionals need to know this. And so I said, I want to write a book with you. And lots of people wanted to write a book with Dan, but he said, well, write something up. And when I wrote it up, he loved it and he sent it to his agent. And within a couple of months, we had a book deal.
Wow.
So that was very exciting. I still really hold on to those moments, because this book came out of a passion to share what was so helpful to me as a parent, and what I believe now my children are 23, 20, and 16. And so I can see the other side of having parented this way. And it's everything I had hoped it would be.
So it works.
It worked on my three. And I think what I hear from lots of people is that it really is, it's part of a revolution with lots of other authors and thinkers and people who went before us, to really bring together what I feel like is my life's mission for my life's work, which is to change how we see and respond to children's behavior. So much of how we see and respond to children's behavior is based in really old ways of thinking that the research show are counter to what we know now. And we're still stuck in very old ways of doing it.
Yeah, that's true. So that leads me to the next question. You talked a little bit about it, but maybe we could just go into that a little bit more, because the question is, why is it so important for parents to know something about the brain and how it works when they parent? What difference does it make?
I mean, I think it's life-changing, actually. I know it's my work, but I will tell you, when I learned, for example, so one of the ideas in the book is really, we talk about the left brain and the right brain, and we talk about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, just sort of looking at these different parts. But for example, one of the things that we talk about is that when our children are having a tantrum or a meltdown, or they're falling apart and they're yelling, if you don't understand what's happening in the brain at that moment, it's really easy to say my child is bad, or my child is a brat, or something's wrong with my kid, or they're just trying to upset me. But when you understand what we're teaching in the book, you're like, oh, the part of their brain that's logical and that helps calm their bodies down and helps them make decisions and regulate their emotions and regulate their body, that part of their brain is offline right now. They can't even access that part of the brain because it's still developing. And when our emotions overwhelm us, it's really hard to access our upstairs brain that allows us to do what I teach to little kids. I say, um, I do the little hand model that Dan Siegel invented that we have an illustration of in the book. And the way I teach it to little kids, the way I taught it to my small children was I would say, make a 5, make a 4, and then hug your thumb with your fingers. And then I would say this part of the brain down here is where we have really big feelings and we just want to do something. And we call this the downstairs brain because it's like the downstairs part of our head. And then this part of our brain is the upstairs part of the brain. And this is the part of the brain that helps us pause and make calm, kind choices and be a problem solver.
Yeah.
But when our emotions get really big, we flip our lid and it's really hard to pause and make calm, kind choices and be a problem solver. So as an example of that, we can teach that to our children. But as we learn that, and by the way, it can happen to us, we flip our lids sometimes as parents too. But when we look at that, we say, oh, my child, this is what's happening with my child. They're not a bad child. There's nothing wrong. That is just their downstairs brain has taken over and their upstairs brain is not, they're not a whole brain child in that moment, right? And so I think it's game changing because we are meaning makers about who our children are and about what their behavior means and about who they become. And so if we understand that, it allows us to understand our children, to tune into them, to support them, and ultimately to give them the developmental and relational experiences that help them develop optimally and thrive. So I do think that those kinds of insights really do change how we feel about our children and who they become. Yeah, and support them as they're developing and understanding they have these still very, often parents expect too much of our children, especially our firstborns. We expect too much too early. So I think just having another way to think about that developing brain is helpful.
Yeah. So this is not a new book. When did you first publish it? Do you remember?
Yes, so it was 11 years ago when this book first came out.
Yeah.
And in fact, this fall it will be 12 years. And I know this well because as I told you, I really wanted to stay home with my children for as much of their time as possible. And my baby started kindergarten in August. I turned 40 in September and the book came out in October. So it was sort of, and I'll be 52 this fall. So I know it'll be 12 years old. So basically the book is becoming a teenager this fall. But yeah, it's still, I still feel so appreciative of how the book has been received in the world, really throughout the world. I had no idea. I thought I was writing a book that I hoped some parents would read. But it's been sort of the book of the last decade for parents who are raising children. If a parent reads books, this likely is to be on their bookshelf. And I think, like I said, it's not just Dan and me, but there have been a number of books that collectively, I think, really are doing what we were talking about changing how we see and respond to children's behaviors. I think it's been so well received because I think it gives parents a way to be intentional in a new way, to know that and feel validated that what we do matters, and that the way we respond to our children can not just help them survive moments like the tantrums and help us survive them, but also to build skills in our children. And, we know that around the world, anxiety and depression are high. And especially now the pandemic has impacted, our families in big ways. I think that, this book is also full of strategies and ways to help our children understand their own brains And there are little cartoons at the end of each chapter that we can read to our children to help them understand how their brains work and how amazing their brains are. And then it also helps, there are stories in there of kids who, dealt with fears or dealt with anxieties or who had challenging, potentially even traumatic experiences happen to them, and how we can really take those moments and help our children's brains process those and use them as places of strength. So I think it brought a lot of what was inside therapists' office and neuroscientists' minds and, in the laboratory.
Make cartoons out of them. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I love these examples. Yeah. Because
They're
it's
so
so
helpful, I
familiar.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes parents, like if parents are like, oh, I don't read that much, I say, well, you can listen to it. It's in audio form, but also just read the cartoons then. Just read the cartoons in the book. And I love it when people send me pictures of their children looking at the cartoons and reading the books. But I think that it's been so well received because it's taking what has been known in science and in therapy offices and things like that, and being given to parents in ways that they can use every day. I think also our work, the Whole Brain Child and our other titles, really give a lot of grace to parents, which is something we really wanted to do, which is to say, look, you don't even have to be close to perfect. You can mess up all the time as a parent, but then repair with your child. And all of your child's development is not solely on you. It's from all the repeated experiences they have in their life, the experiences they have. And then what we say in these books is the experience of their relationship with you is one of the most important things you can do for their whole life. And then we tell them how to do it in ways that work, that are easy to do. So I think that's why it has been so well received. But I don't know. Why do you think it's been so well received?
Yeah, well, I think it's really the quite maybe tough material has been made really accessible. You don't have to know anything about the brain. It doesn't. Yeah, you just, it's for everyone. And I also really love that you have some examples here from your own lives as parents, and I think it's really good. I think every parent think it's so great to read or hear that they're not the only ones who are not perfect, and that you as well, who are the experts, not experts but really the experts, that you too sometimes mess up, but that you can find strategies to repair afterwards, and that makes all the difference as well.
Yeah, it's freeing.
Yeah, it's very freeing. Yeah, that's true. 12 strategies, or strategies is probably a good word. Which one do you think made the most difference for you as a mother? Which one is your favorite?
The very first one in the book, called Connect and Redirect. And I think that one, and really we took the concept of connect and redirect, and we expanded it into discipline in our second book, No Drama Discipline. And really connection is what our book, The Power of Showing Up, is all about. And so it's a theme that bleeds through all of our books because it's so important, and it's the number one strategy. For me, the first strategy in Whole Brain Child, for me, that one's most important because what the science is very clear about is that at our children's worst, that's when they most need connection. And I tend to be very task-oriented. I tend to be very left brain. I tend to be very problem solve. And really what we can get to all of those things. We can get to problem solving. We can get to all of those things, but really in the hard moments, in the stressful moments, really what our kids need most from us most of the time is that connection. And so what that strategy is really about is connecting emotionally and physically and all of that, but it's at a deeper level. We talk about connecting right brain to right brain, which means making my left hemisphere be quiet for a minute, and to wait before we solve, and to wait before I redirect their behavior and all of that, and to first really tune into what their experience is. And it it's not only way more effective, you know, I tell lots of stories, and we have stories in the book about this, um, but you know, instead of just saying like, you're supposed to do this, you need to do it, go do it. What a simple, just little fix is to say something like, I know you don't feel like doing your schoolwork. You've already been doing schoolwork all day today, and it's boring sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, you
And you
remember.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can redirect and say it really is time for you to get to work, because we need to make sure you have, you know, that we're going to bed at a good time tonight. So it's not changing my boundaries, it's not changing the problem solving or the limits or my expectations, but it's really connect first. That's the first part of the interaction. It's the first thing, and it's the most important thing. I often talk about the idea of whatever behavior you need to address is on the back burner of the stove, but the relationship's on the first burner. You know, it's the one we need to stir that pot the most. And so for me, it's the first strategy in the book. And it's the first thing I try to remember in any, even now at 23, 20, and 16, it's still the thing that I think should guide as many interactions as they possibly can, to, instead of saying, you know, come on, it's time for dinner, to say, oh, you look tired, sweetie. It's hard to get up off the couch, you know, something like that. But we want you to join us. Come on, it's dinner time. And to me, that's really, I want to do that in all my relationships. So
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah, not just for children or
Yeah,
parents and children. It's,
exactly.
you know, every person likes to be understood and
Yeah.
seen and mirrored, you know, from the people who care about them. So that's probably also my favorite, or it's the strategy that has definitely made the impact. The difference is so sudden. You notice right away that this is a game changer, you know.
It is. I mean,
It's,
really, that kind of connection just softens us.
yeah.
So it really reduces oppositional behavior. It reduces, you know, any kind of power struggles. Just that piece of connection and feeling like, oh, my parent gets me. They see me. They understand how I feel. They're open to talking about emotion. I mean, it's so effective. In the moment, the survive moment, but it also allows our children to thrive in the relationship to thrive. So it's survive and thrive.
And the foundation also for the rest of their lives. I mean, when they are teenagers, you know, you
Yes.
want them to come to you. So
Yes.
if you've shown them during their first years that you as a parent are willing to listen to them, and they can come to you whenever, you know, and they're loved anyways, you know, even
Yes.
if they are sad or angry or frustrated, you know. That's, I think that it is my one of my goals, you know, to have that foundation. And you have to do it, you know, in the early years. You can't start with this when they're teenagers, then it's
That's right.
kind of, you know, not too late, but you know, it's easier if you start that way, I think.
Yeah, and I think one just as a quick addition to that, I think we have to remember that, you know, the way that the brain is an association machine. And so the experiences we have really wire our brain. It's not just, you know, it's not just influencing their minds or their character or their behavior. We're really influencing how their brain is firing and wiring, and who they're becoming neurologically, what, you know, what connections are getting laid down. And, you know, one of the things I often teach is that if your child you know, pouts or, you know, does something like that, usually we get really mad. We're like, you're so ungrateful, and we get really mad. And or we might say, why are you making such a big deal about this? So oftentimes when our children behave in a way that's not ideal, we minimize their feelings, we criticize their behavior, all of these things. But we have to remember that the brain's like, ooh, when I kind of expressed how I felt there, I didn't do it with words, but I did it with my face and my body language. The way my mom just responded, that didn't feel very good. And so I'm not sure I want to keep sharing with her. So it's almost like the brain is like, ooh, that felt bad. Stay away from that. Versus if I say, oh, what just happened? You looked so excited a minute ago when I said we were going to go to the movies. But then when I said no popcorn, something happened. What happened? And then my kid might say, well, I'm just disappointed because I love popcorn. And I can say, oh yeah, it's really disappointing when we hope for something and it doesn't happen. And that can leave us feeling disappointed. And we can feel disappointed and grateful at the same time. And we're not going to get the movie popcorn, but but do you still want to go to the movies, right? And so in those, and then my kid's like, okay, well, she understood how I felt. She didn't criticize me for it, and that felt good. And so I feel better about continuing to share. So yeah, you're right. It has to kind of start, and it's never too late though. You start really now, wherever your child is, start doing that now.
Yeah, start today. Yeah, that's what happened to me, I think, yesterday or the day before, when I said, we can bring homemade popcorn.
Right. Yes. Yes. And it's okay. I think that's one of the big ideas in our books too, is we can say no to the behavior and still say yes to our child's experience. Like, oh, that's disappointing. You really would love theater popcorn. And, we're not doing that, but it's totally okay to feel disappointed. And my friend, Dr. Aliza Pressman, has a good way of saying what I just said. She said, all feelings are acceptable, but not all behaviors are acceptable.
Yeah.
And so we really want to make that clear, that we're going to say yes to their feelings, even if we hold a boundary and say no to a particular behavior.
Yeah, because I do think there's still some misunderstandings in this, because I think a lot of parents think that, and grandparents, who had quite a different upbringing, I think they to see the difference between the behavior and the feeling and the person, because this is not like not to set limits or to be limitless, or that you can't say no. It's not about that. It's just it's just.
And you're right, people get it wrong. I think the Whole Brain Child and some of our other books, people refer to them as part of some of the main body of work for what people are now referring to as gentle parenting. And I've never claimed that. I've never said that this is a book for gentle parenting, because gentle makes it sound too soft or permissive. And really having limits and boundaries helps our children feel safe. And so I think I like responsive parenting, or respectful parenting, or gentle boundaried parenting, or something like that. But it's not permissive. It's it really holds limits too.
Yeah. To sum up, or to finish off, what do you think is or are the most urgent challenges that parents are facing today, and what would you like to say to them to help them? If you should had just a few minutes to say something, what would you say?
I think the world is really challenging. I think it's a complicated time of life, and probably every generation has felt that. I think we have a couple of big challenges. One is levels of anxiety and fear. I think children are experiencing a lot of anxiety right now, and some of that's pandemic created, but I also think a lot of it has to do with too much stimuli in the world. And so that's also related to another big challenge that we all have to figure out, and that is too much screen time. And I think that's, those are typically the two biggest questions I get asked by my audience, is like, how do I help with my child's anxiety, and how do I help with how do I handle screen time? And I think those are actually related. We really do have what's being called kind of a mental health crisis, with high rates of anxiety and depression, and even suicidality in ways that we haven't seen before. And I think there are some really basic things we know that are protective factors, and things that are risk factors. And protective factors, I mean, a lot of times the things like, one of the best protective factors for your child, the most important protective factor for your child, is a strong attachment relationship with you. With their parent, a parent who helps them feel safe and seen and soothed and secure, and knowing they're going to keep showing up for them and providing that kind of safety and connection. So that's the number one most important one. And sometimes that's really hard for parents, because sometimes parents are struggling with anxiety, or parents are, our lives are so full and overscheduled lots of times. So I think sometimes, and even screens can get in the way of kind of really that kind of connection. Another really important protective factor is sleep. And I think that screens interfere with that as well. So it's really important. We have, I think there's a big difference too. I don't like the idea of just saying screens are bad, all screens are bad, all, because there are some beautiful things about nature and learning, and there's really great content for children. And I think it's very different to be creating content, where you're building something or drawing on a screen versus just passively sitting and scrolling social media, right? Those are very different experiences. So I think we know now, um, especially from some recent research that's been coming out, that that a lot of social media early on is really bad for our children. And so I think we want to have minimal screen time as long as possible and delay when our children get smart devices, because I think they're overstimulated. I think they're exposed to content that they're not emotionally ready to handle. I think there's a lot of comparison that happens that makes them not feel good about themselves, particularly girls. And so these things all play into getting less sleep, and then too much stimulation, and then a lot of anxiety about how they don't know how to navigate the world. So I think a big challenge right now is focusing on relationship and reducing screen time. And all of those things are hard because as parents, we're overstimulated and we are overscheduled, and so much is expected of us, particularly those of us who are working parents, right? So, we have so many demands from work, and then family life's really demanding. So I think a big urgent challenge for parents is to prioritize relationship and prioritize these protective factors. And one other protective factor I have to say, and I'm currently writing a book. I swore I wasn't going to write anymore, but I'm currently writing a book with a different co-author named Georgie Vincent. And the book is about how to play with our children. And I think that play, where we follow our child's lead and we trust their play, and we give them lots of time to play. Those are also really important protective factors. So I guess I would say this is like the things that generations ago knew, like time outside and letting children play and focusing on relationship. I mean, obviously we know more about those things now. And family time, those are really, really important, to the degree that people can have family meals as many nights a week as possible. That's just it doesn't have to be tons and tons of time. But really we need time every day to connect with each other. And I think that's challenging, but it's really crucial.
I think that is really great advice.
And in the Whole Brain Child, we have a strategy, and they're called increase the family fun factor. And it's really about bringing joy and play and laughter and just delighting in our children, and delighting in our family life, even when it's challenging. That it really is one of the best things we can do to build the brain.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much, Tina, for your time and for your really important work and your great advice. And good luck with writing your next book.
Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoy The Whole Brain Child. It really, every time I go back and read it or look at it or get to talk about it, I just feel so grateful that I was able to write this book with Dan. It's really been something I've lived, and I still just feel so lit up by the joy of other parents getting to enjoy it as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.